Welcome back to the Game Design and Implementation video series. In this video we will talk briefly about the topic of pitching game ideas and provide some useful tips for you to consider in your presentations. During your studies at QUT, you may be required to pitch your game ideas in front of a large group of people. This will typically be your classmates and tutors, as this type of activity is usually for workshop demonstration related purposes. Sometimes though, it forms part of an assessment item. Now, a lot of people dread this kind of public speaking, and for good reason. Talking in front of a large group of people, some of whom you may not know, can be a nerve-wracking experience. After all, most people do not just go up to large groups of people and start talking about random things. Public speaking is therefore quite unnatural, and easy to see how statistics regarding public speaking rated higher than a fear of death. However, when done correctly, it is a straightforward and useful way of clearly and quickly articulating your game ideas to a public forum. There is no real guide to follow when it comes to pitching ideas. Some people like to describe a life experience, while some will just get to the meat of it. Others might start with a concept, describe a mechanic, and link the two towards the end. You should figure out a system that you are comfortable with instead of emulating what someone else thinks is the pitching formula. It may not necessarily work for you. So, in this video, I will instead cover some useful tips regarding game pitching that you should seriously consider during your degree at QUT. There is nothing worse than getting to the end of your pitch and having someone still ask you what exactly your game is about. During your presentation, you will likely use adjectives and keywords such as third person, dark and gritty, unforgiving difficulty, and etc. However, when they are strewn throughout your presentation, the combined sum of them become lost on most audiences. Even using the keywords I described just then, you are probably picturing something along the lines of Dark Souls, which is a good thing if that is the kind of game you want your game to mimic. To address this, it is often useful to summarize what your game is in 1 or 2 sentences, filtering out all the trivial and non-essential elements of gameplay, and typically doing so early on. You want your audience to be on the same page as you throughout the presentation, so paint them a picture sooner rather than later. You don't want them trying to piece your game together in their minds while you are still presenting. Chances are your game and the one they think you are talking about will not be the same, which will cause all kinds of problems during Q&A. Believe me. Now, this might seem obvious, but a presentation that does not rely on imagery, video, or even abstract elements such as mood boards is not only a dull presentation, but one that is completely open to interpretation by the audience. There is nothing wrong with saying that this mechanic is like X from Y game, showing a picture of it and explaining how it will work within the context of your game. Chances are you will not be reinventing the wheel most of the time in your games, and that's fine. Not every mechanic needs to be unique. If you have prototyped part of your game already, take the time to record a short clip of it to demonstrate how things will work. Explaining things when you can use pictures, video, or even actual gameplay will help describe your game in a much more useful manner than your words and gestures ever will. When describing your game, you should also take some consideration into the type of audience you are presenting to. For the most part, this audience will be your peers at QUT. You therefore do not need to describe to them what a video game is, or even a particular genre within it. Usually a reference to something in pop culture is enough for said audience to understand what you are describing. This means you can skip unnecessary information and get to the core of what your game's gameplay is about. You can and should talk about deeper level concepts regarding game design theory, programming principles, and even project management. These are all questions that most of your peers and tutors will have anyway, so addressing them in your presentation will show that you have considered it and shown and respected your audience's capacity to understand it. It will also do wonders for helping you get a grasp on the scope of your project, something that you will end up combating during the game's actual development anyway. As important to a game as a story may be, often the story is irrelevant to the game's core mechanics or prototype stages. A game's theme and background can be useful for describing the game to an audience, but you should never really describe the narrative for anything longer than a couple of sentences. Unless it is the point of your presentation, most of your audience is not going to care. In addition to this, make sure you do not go over time or severely under time. Both cases demonstrate an inability to sum up your game idea in a meaningful length of time, and will set an unhelpful bias by the audience to probe you for more useful information. This is never a good situation, and can most often be remedied by simply practicing what you are going to say a couple of times, even if it's just in your head. On that note, not taking some time to practice your pitch to some degree is also a recipe for disaster. At the very least, you should have some dot points you wish to cover, and make certain you can talk about them for the duration of time. Using palm cards or reading off a piece of paper are generally okay, but try not to read off them if you can. Providing additional context to what you have on screen is usually more useful, even if it is just your personal experiences. Finally, let's talk about the thing that most students will find is their biggest hurdle. Being nervous is completely normal. Again, public speaking is unnatural. However, thinking about it too much usually makes it much worse. You should realize that you are the person who knows the most about what you are talking about, and just be confident in your delivery because of that. Most, if not all, of your classmates will be relatively understanding, and any that are not will get their turn in due time. In a week, no one is going to care or even remember what you said, so try to relax, have a bit of fun with your delivery, and realize that it's not that big a deal.